see you guys in the dark.
So this happened about 7.5 years ago when I was 13. My grandmother was in the hospital with pneumonia. By the time my family got there was about 11 to 15 of us. Yeah, it's a lot, but 5 out of the 8 children were there with their families. After a little while, they told me that we needed to leave so that they could give her some shots. At the time, we didn't know there was a waiting room on the floor, so my uncle suggested we go down to the first floor so we can sit in the ER waiting room. We had to go down to 2 separate elevators since there were so many of us. Once we got down there, we saw 2 nurses hiding behind a door. When we asked what's wrong, they said nothing, you can still go in there. We walked in. It was about 2 p.m. on a Sunday. There was no one in there, and the lights were off. Yes, in retrospect, we should have just turned around and walked back out. But like all white people in horror movies, we didn't think anything of it. We met up with the rest of the family. That's when we noticed 2 other guys. The first man was sitting with his hands behind his back. The second one was standing behind him, holding his wrists together. The man sitting was staring daggers right at me. After about 10 minutes of sitting and staring, a third man in a hospital security uniform came up and asked if we saw anything. Visibly confused, we said no, and they told us that we needed to leave. We went back up to the 4th floor and found the waiting room. It was right next to the psych ward with a sign that says "Stay clear." There is a high chance of flight risks. Now, you might be thinking, what's so scary about that story? A random guy was staring at a 13-year-old girl. Well, a little while later, we found out what had happened. The man sitting there with his hands restrained was a junkie looking for a quick fix. He had walked in and was told that he couldn't get any drugs without a medical reason, so he pulled out a knife and stabbed the woman at the reception desk in the neck. Why we were all out in the room with this man while the hospital was supposedly in lockdown, I have no clue. I also have no clue where the police were during this whole situation. This story does kind of have a happy ending for the woman at least. About 2 years ago, this incident was brought up at a family gathering. My cousin said that the woman did survive. She no longer works at the hospital and has a lot of difficulties resulting from her injury, but she was working as a secretary for a school. So I'm definitely glad that that woman is all right and everything worked out for her. And I'm hoping that the cops got there and took care of the junkie before anyone else got hurt in that hospital. In late January this year, I, who am a 15-year-old female, was committed to an adolescent mental hospital for a suicide attempt. Something that was stupid on my part, but not crucial to the story, just background information as to why I was there. This is the first time I was ever sent to a facility like this, and having a severe anxiety disorder, I was scared out of my mind. Cue the first run-in with Arthur. I'm replacing everyone's real names, of course. I won't speak to him on his physical appearance, but he, who is a 17-year-old male, looked like the classic school shooter kind of kid. Heavy boots, all black clothing, long hair, etc. No judgment. I was fairly edgy when I was younger. On my first day there, I noticed right away that he would be staring at me all the time. The first thing he said to me was, "I like your boots." I was wearing Doc Martens, which was pretty normal. I appreciated the compliment, so I opted to start talking to him. A big mistake on my part. We started off simply by talking about books and music of which we had similar tastes in. But then Arthur started sitting next to me at every group meeting, every meal, everything. Following me would be a better phrase. His words started getting more concerning as time went on. I saw a number of red flags, but it's not like I could do anything about it. We were being held in a hospital. I couldn't just leave. I have exact quotes from him because I kept a journal at my time from the hospital. Here are some of them. "You seem like you have no corruption. You're an outlier. Everyone here is a degenerate. You know that there are sociopaths here, right?" Hinting at himself. But this is just the beginning. Things didn't really heat up until he started giving me poems. Poems with eerie, biblical, religious references that he would just slide under the door of my room. I don't have any of the original poems. The hospital had confiscated them, so I'm going to try to summarize based on my journal entries. There was, of course, the poem where he said, "I was the Virgin Mary," which, though I find incredibly funny now, was scary at the time. In the poems, he would romanticize me in an angelic way, and contrasted himself as a demon, if I remember correctly. The last poem he gave me was concerning. He seemed to be counting down the days until something. He referred to some Catholic day of reckoning that for the life of me, I just can't remember. I'm not a member of that religion, but it was clear that this day of reckoning involved me. I finally reported this to one of the staff members, and they moved me to a different unit. I later found out, after my discharge, that author was schizophrenic. I'm glad I said something when I did, because that probably would have ended badly for me. "2015 to 2017 was a very bad part of my life. My best friend committed suicide in May of 2015. My uncle did the same in September. I was in my senior year, but I was spiraling gradually. I had a history of mental illness dating back to when I was 10, but things just seemed to be getting worse and worse over time. The next year, I learned I had to repeat my senior year because I had too many absences. I had weekly therapy appointments, bad mental health days, where I couldn't just do anything, and my anxiety had reached a point where I was constantly on the verge of a panic attack. At the start of senior year part 2, two of my very close friends, honestly they were more like aunts to me, passed away in a house fire. I stayed home from school for a week. Then the same month, my grandfather passed away. And shortly after my grandmother passed away, after that, I was officially not a functioning human being. I got so bad, I wasn't going to school at all. I couldn't. I was sleeping nearly 20 hours a day, barely eating, and I couldn't leave my room unless I had to feed my cat or go to the bathroom. Eventually, school told me that I could not be allowed on campus unless I re-enrolled. December 2016, my maternal grandma got me a job as a housekeeper at the old folks' home that she worked at. I was there for 2 weeks before I had a massive panic attack in the elevator. I was dry heaving, hyperventilating, and I couldn't stop crying. When I recovered, I quit because it was humiliating. I also was living with my sister, our mom, and her husband at the time. They got married October 2016. He's an asshole. It started with him making jokes about burying my sister and my cats. Then he kept letting my sister's dog out without the lead. We didn't have a backyard, so we had one of those lead things that you stick onto the ground. And then he kept putting him into the garage in the heat of summer in the Midwest. A few times when the dog got out, we were searching for him. My stepdad complained that it was taking too long. Once it was an early October morning, and he let the dog run outside without the lead, and we were all searching for him. I was woken up by my mom, and I put on the first bottoms that I could find, which were cut-off denim shorts. It was rainy as I was running up and down every street near our house looking for our dog. Thankfully, my mom found him, and we got in the car to go home. The only thing that my stepdad said was that I couldn't wear shorts so short. There is so much more I could tell you about him, all about how he fucked my mom up financially. But the rest that is relevant to the story is that he is the sole reason we lost our house. After that, we had all had to scatter, basically. I was living at our dad's. He's a truck driver, so he's barely home. And the rest of them were living with my mom's mom. I thought it would be okay for me to essentially live alone, but I quickly started feeling lonely. One night, I had a panic attack so bad that I fell into an old coping mechanism where I self-harmed, but it turned even worse. This wasn't the first time I attempted this, but this was the only time that ended with me in a hospital. I told my mom, who came to get me and took me to the hospital. They bandaged me up, a few therapists came in to talk to me, and eventually I was sent to inpatient. Everyone there was really nice. We had snack time twice a day, meals 3 times a day, and there was always a group that you could join. I mostly stuck to the art ones. There was a TV with a few couches, and most of us gathered there. For a while we watched the Disney Channel. There was a friend I knew from my brother's friend group in there too, and he kind of kept this guy who was creeping on me. I was wearing a matching pink hoodie and sweatpants, and he kept calling me Pink, always trying to sit with me, way too close, and he was just very touchy. Anyways, it was a Sunday after dinner, and we were all back in the adult wing. When I was bored, I'd walk the halls just to pass time. The halls are kind of in a straight line, with the nurses in the middle, and next to them is the main area. You have to walk around the nurses' station just to get down the other hall, and then there's a huge metal door that closes in case of an emergency. I was walking down the opposite hall from my room. As I was passing the main area, I noticed a guy getting really upset, and nurses trying to talk him down. He kept saying he missed his family. As I got to the hall with my room, the door closed. We were all told to go to our room, but none of us wanted to be alone because we didn't know what was happening. So we all sat down on the floor and talked quietly. We could hear him get violent. We had to have been sitting there for at least an hour because the nurse came with a snack cart and let us have some juice, cheese, and yogurt. Another hour passed, and we were told to go to bed, and that our nurses will give us our meds as soon as they can. I went to bed, and in the morning, he wasn't in the adult wing at all. I've never seen him again, but I hope to God that he's okay. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night, and I'll see you next time.